I am excited for this next interview. Pete Moore is one of the foremost experts when it comes to advising fitness and lifestyle companies on transactions and anything related to business, finance, and investment. A former investment banker, he now advises companies across the fitness and wellness ecosystem on everything from M&A to equity capital markets and debt capital markets. I don't know anybody in the world with as much insight on finance and investment in fitness and wellness than Pete Moore. He is an absolute gem, and I look forward to interviewing him right now. Ladies and gentlemen, get your thinking caps on and get global for Pete Moore. Pete Moore, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's get stuck in straight away. For those perhaps that aren't aware of the term Halo, can you just quickly describe how you view the sector and what it's all about?
Sure. Well, great to be here, and thanks for having us on, and good to see you again on the video side. I've been a health and wellness banker since 2003, and I never had too many companies come to us and say, "Hey, I've got an awesome wellness idea." And then I decided to Google the word wellness and found out in the 1920s, there was a guy named Dr. Halbert Dunn who worked at the Mayo Clinic, and he was a biostatistician, and he was looking at the data and saw that everyone was getting sick. So he was trying to solve for illness and decided to create the word wellness as effectively the antonym. So if you're not sick, you're just okay. And I said, I don't want to be a wellness banker anymore, just making people okay and bringing capital into the wellness industry to hope people don't get sick. And I wanted to try and elevate that. And I was kicking around with some letters and realized that the HALO acronym would be a great acronym to use. Health, active, lifestyle, outdoors, and create the HALO effect and to elevate from the word wellness to make people awesome and not to just make sure that they're not sick. So that was the evolution of HALO. And over the next 5 years, what we're trying to do is to get people who own companies to say I'm part of the HALO sector instead of part of the anti-aging or I'm part of the health club industry or I'm a boutique fitness operator. I want them to say I'm a HALO company. So that is part of our evangelistic goal.
Well, look, it's a great goal, Pete. I mean, you are one of the very few unique advisors to the HALO sector. We've saw incredibly a number of fantastic deals happen this year and throughout the crisis. Can you pick a couple of great deals from the rack and what's impressed you and why?
Yeah, look, I mean, the proliferation of capital that's going into the at-home and the digital space is, unprecedented. Peloton's stock price being up 400%. Since March 15th or so, has been pretty awesome. And thankfully, there is a platform that was the market leader in order to ensure that people were able to get the workouts that they need. During COVID, I think the average is somewhere between 15 to 20 pounds of additional weight that people have put on. Obesity, loneliness, and diabetes are the top three leaders of terminal issues for people's health. So you've seen a lot of investments over the last 6 months. If you asked me to kind of cherry pick a couple ones that I thought were really interesting, this week a group called Tonal, Tonal, brought in $110 million of new capital. Some of that was from some celebrities and athletes. So I think there's an additional wave of new investors that are coming in that are also, influencers and that can stand behind a product. I think, the Zwift deal, ZWIFT, which is, a cycling modality that allows people to connect with their own bikes. For a company like that to raise $450 million of equity, quite frankly, I wasn't in the room and didn't work on the deal, but you've got to think that companies like that and investors that are investing in those companies are clearly thinking that groups like Zwift are going to replace health club memberships. The only way the numbers work is if you're cutting in to a revenue stream that is already in the bricks and mortar space and is going to shift into the digital space. So I think that was kind of a marker for me, or somewhat of a concern that, wow, some big VCs here don't view this as a temporary issue, that this is a long-term systemic shift in revenue. And, that's a concern for me of like a, somewhat of a warning light, if you will, that this at home is not only here to stay, but, there's some big bets being made on the other side of that. You asked me what I think the best deal was, or the most interesting to me, was the Lululemon acquisition of Mirror, for $500 million. It's interesting for two reasons. One is my hope as an investment banker and as being in mergers and acquisitions is to get as many multi-billion-dollar companies to become potential buyers of companies in the health and fitness or in the halo sector. So when you see a company like Lululemon make a $500 million bet, to have a connected mirror related to fitness in someone's home, and then, the play there is obviously, every instructor is going to be wearing Lululemon, and you're literally going to be able to touch the screen and purchase that and get it shipped to you, within a day or two. So I think that opens up a really interesting wave of, who's a potential buyer of the next connected fitness, whether it's a streaming technology or whether it's actual hardware, or whether in the future it's bricks and mortar. So I would love to see, Walgreens, CVS, Nike, Under Armour, Adidas. Like if those companies say, hey, I get what Lululemon did and I want to be in this space, the influx of capital and talent and sheer volume of deals is going to become really, really interesting. So as an investment banker, you typically go to your top 20 or 30 private equity funds to do deals, and there's typically a cap on what a company is worth. But what's a Mirror worth to Lululemon from a standpoint of, additional revenue streams that come out of that, piece of hardware in somebody's house? I think that, to me, is kind of the bellwether deal that is going to shift people's thoughts on who potential buyers are or who potential partners are in the industry.
Like you say, that was a fantastic deal. I mean, we work with Lululemon. We didn't see that coming, but what a deal that was, Pete. Looking ahead, perhaps for the next maybe 2 to 4 quarters, where else do you see money moving into the sector? Will it be from private equity? Will it be from other type of funds? Will it be from these more strategic corporates? And if you do think, will it all be tech related, or will other verticals also get benefit of this new cash?
Yeah, look, I mean, direct to consumer is clearly, what seems to be the logical choice for growth investment. Anything going directly to the home and not having to deal with landlords, not having to deal with behavioral preferences or concerns on behalf of members that, don't feel safe going into a health club. So, direct to consumer supplements, direct to consumer workout recovery. We're invested in a company called Higher Dose, which makes infrared body wraps. So as people kind of outfit their gyms, which was kind of the first wave, now they're probably going to outfit their homes with, whether it's an infrared sauna or whether it's a salt room or whether it's, a TheraBody, device. Like all of this is going to end up being part of the home. And I think people are getting more and more comfortable with working out at home. Yet I don't think, at least personally, I'm kind of sick of the experience that it's binary, that I either don't work out or I work out in my home. Like I'm ready to get back inside of an experience in a live class. But you're going to see a wave of money going into the direct consumer. I think on the side of private equity and capital going into the bricks and mortar space, fortunately, I'm on speed dial with a lot of operators that own bricks and mortar health clubs. Unfortunately, I'm also on speed dial with operators of bricks and mortar health clubs. So what we're seeing, unfortunately, over the last couple of weeks is a lot of operators calling and saying, my banks had some empathy for the first 90 days. and they gave us some terms where we could extend our facilities. We didn't have to pay interest. We'd kind of tack it onto the back. I would say, unfortunately, the empathy is out of the system, and now it is about I got to get paid. How much money do you have in your security deposit if you're the landlord to the tenant? There was initially, I'd say, a sharing of the pain related to the pandemic. Now it's, that's my building, you're a tenant and you pay. And if you don't pay, I don't care if you're open or not, like that's my building and that's the benefit of me being a landlord. And, tough. So only the companies that have really strong leverage, such as, let's take LA Fitness as an example. They have one real estate investment trust, a REIT, that they have 52 leases with. So they've got leverage with a REIT to say, hey, look, this is how this is going to go down. And if you don't like it and you're not fair about it, then, I'm going to bankrupt, this subsidiary that has all of your leases and go try and find someone else to backfill. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, I think there's going to be some distressed investors that are going to come and say, I like that chain of HVLP 2.0, or I like that chain of Orange Theories, and I'll give you money to pay down your debt and get these guys off your back. And I do think, within 12 to 18 months, these businesses are going to normalize, and there'll probably be less competitors that were able to get through this period. And I think you're actually going to see a rebalancing of the supply demand, where the strongest players financially and from a programming standpoint and from a management standpoint are actually going to have they're going to actually provide even more profitability and value to their investors, but it's going to take 12 months to 18 months to get that kind of visibility.
You rightly say, Pete, that you've got investors obviously on your Rolodex and your clientele list. Do you think a number of these will be waiting on the sidelines at the moment, waiting for valuations to drop a little bit, for distress to come in? What do you think the investor perspective is on terms of company valuation? And then let me just kind of piggyback on that a little bit. What do you think in the mind of some of these corporate CEOs? Do you think they're quite realistic about what their company is worth today?
Yeah, I think there's a dose of cold water being poured on everyone right now. So if you said to me, I've got this 20 health club chain in X state in the US, what's that worth? Having a conversation about what something's worth, assume that there is a buyer for something. So, if I have a bottle of baby powder in my in my closet, what's the price of that? Well, there has to be someone that actually wants to buy it for it to even have a value. So unfortunately, I think there's a lot of clubs and a lot of chains right now that actually don't have a valuation, as kind of odd as that may seem, because there aren't buyers yet, because there's not enough visibility on how their landlords are acting, what the visibility is from a government standpoint of getting to a capacity level that would even allow you to get to any semblance of profitability, or how long it's going to take from a cash burn to get to the other side. So I definitely think valuations are going to get back to reasonable values. But the problem that we're running into right now, and I'll give you an example, is I've got a client that had $10 million of EBITDA, and it's a high-end health club chain. I would argue that pre-COVID, the company was worth, let's say, $70 to $80 million, 7 to 8 times EBITDA. So the EBITDA right now is zero. And the question is, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I like those assets, and I would love to own those assets, in a year and a half from now, those assets are going to be worth 70 or 80 million. The question is, from a seller standpoint, how much of a discount, or can you structure a deal for me that basically gives me $10 or $20 million today, and gives me some kind of earnout or some kind of seller note that when the world returns, I haven't given you the keys, and basically, haven't received any value for what I built, or, can I get a certain amount now? Can I get a certain amount in 2 years? And can I own a piece of the business, in 5 years? So I think from a valuation standpoint, it's very hard for an institutional investor to put too much money down up front, not knowing when the business is going to actually turn profitable again. At the same time, there are investors that know that, humans have been around for 150,000 years. We've gotten through pandemics, we've gotten through wars, we've gotten through, civil unrest. So we're making progress, and this too will pass. We've got more science now than we've ever had before. So I'm an optimist on the human race. I'm a pessimist to think that it's going to wash itself out in the next 90 days. So to answer your question, I think the most creative investors from an institutional level and the most reasonable sellers are going to find a path to a deal. And what I'm hoping is that there's not enough creativity, or that there's not enough flexibility on behalf of a buyer and seller or an entrepreneur and investor, that you lose a lot of really strong assets that are helping a lot of people, that give a lot of joy and results. So I've seen a couple of recent articles where there's one in California, like a bellwether of a residential community, had a big tennis center, and they just announced that they're closing, forever. So think about, there's 6,000 people that live in that community that, wake up every morning excited to go play tennis or go swim in a pool, or use the childcare, so you're taking away what I would deem, essential activities for people to live, a healthy, active lifestyle outdoors. And that's going to have its own, significant tax on this country and probably internationally. So I'm hoping people find paths to a deal, or that a club like that would say, hey, look, I'm actually closing down and I'll reopen when the war ends, effectively. So that's what I'm hoping.
We touched earlier on about the buyers and sellers universe here. There will obviously be some industry consolidation, Pete, as companies get distressed. But of course, there will be a new array of buyers coming into the market. Looking ahead and maybe forecasting where you see M&A happening over the next 12 months, do you think the majority of that will actually be for distressed assets? Or do you believe there'll be quite a lot of strategic, high-value deals being done across the sector?
If you look at the health club space, I think, just given the constraints on occupancy, you're going to see somewhat of an urge to merge, just in order to keep the lights on and to maybe get a larger diversification of clubs. In those cases, it's not necessarily going to be somebody wins or loses. It's basically going to be almost like a partnered hibernation, if you will, or almost like a corporate sheltering in place, I guess would be another quote to kind of create or analogy. So I don't see big value deals happening because there's really no cash flow to support the valuation. I do think you're going to see, rescue financing, which I guess would be another term for, distressed, where you've got entrepreneurs and companies that have created really nice platforms in some of these larger branded franchise networks that put too much debt on the company. At the time, it looked like it wasn't too much debt. It looked like a fair amount of debt. Now it looks like there's too much. So I think you're going to have institutional investors say, hey, look, I'll provide rescue financing. Barry's Boot Camp, as an example, 3 months ago took in, I don't know if this was announced, but it was a $30 million preferred equity investment from a private equity firm called Light Bay Capital. That was clearly, the equivalent of a, let's keep the lights on here. Let's keep the team in place. And when we come out of this, our program is still awesome. The millennials and, weekend warriors like myself still love that program, and that love for the program is not going to dissipate. But it's frozen in time right now. So I got to help a company like that get to the other side. So I think you're going to see strong companies be able to attract that kind of capital. Some of those terms might come with, a layer of, I wouldn't say a pound of flesh, but like 6 ounces of flesh, to use like a petite filet analogy. But look, I mean, that's kind of like the new risk return profile is going to play itself out, in this rescue financing. I think some of these companies, unfortunately, have so much debt. Some of these regional health club operators have a lot of debt, just aren't that well positioned, and the banks are going to have to take a real haircut in order for the business to succeed, or for somebody to say, hey, I'll put, $30 million behind $100 million of debt of a company that only had, let's say, $15 million of EBITDA, before. And then also just one other point to make, not to go against my sector or my category of investment bankers, but we got pretty creative on what adjusted EBITDA meant. So, for your listeners here, EBITDA used to just be, hey, what's the cash flow of your business? And we started to do deals like every time the market, is hot, you'd say, well, this is the EBITDA of the company today, but the company's also got another 10 locations that they have a shovel in the ground. So let's add the EBITDA from those 10 locations and make it an adjusted EBITDA. And let's take that, that trip and fall, workers' comp issue, and let's add back another 200,000. Let's take that CFO that we replaced with this other CFO who was making too much money. So like you had all these adjustments to what the actual numbers were, and private equity groups and institutional investors were paying a multiple of an adjusted number that was kind of like artificially higher. And those numbers actually now don't even play out. So these companies either are sitting with a lot more debt based on an adjusted number, or have equity groups that say, hey, like I actually overvalued this company and I'm pissed about it. So when they want to put more money back into the company, now they're saying, hey, let's look at the actual EBITDA. We're actually going to use a number that I want to use and not a number you want to use.
Well, look, it's been a very busy year for you, Pete, and you've done quite a phenomenal job in building the brand up already. For those that don't read or don't watch the Halo talks that was on Pete's website, absolutely please subscribe to those and also have a look at the Halo Pledge. Before we go, Pete, what's coming up for you in the next 12 months? Where are you seeing upside for you in the company? What are you investing in yourself?
Yeah, so we've got a small investment arm where we put a little bit of seed capital to work. The areas we're really excited about, from an early stage investment, one is we made an investment in a company called the Athlete Book, which is a virtual recruiting platform to try and get Division 1, 2, and 3 athletes in the U.S. into jobs. So I think part of, the initiative of companies in the Halo sector should be to hire athletes and get them into their next phase of their career. On the digital side, I see a lot of opportunity in rewards and bringing members back into the clubs. We've got an investment and put additional money into a company called Promotion Vault. So those are two areas that I find interesting. From a standpoint of what we're doing, kind of our day job of banking is really to try and help entrepreneurs, figure out what their options are through the next 6 months. I've kind of been hesitant, and we're friends, so I'll tell you and your audience here, I'm hesitant to kind of become a restructuring advisor because, when you go into these bankruptcy cases, you have to wake up with a different mindset. When you work on growth equity deals, you wake up and you're excited every day. And you're trying to sell somebody on the growth of a business that and you have a lot of conviction that, hey man, look, this company is going to grow, kind of catch this lightning in a bottle, and here's what you got to pay for it, and kind of throw, capital or rocket fuel onto a business. That's fun. that's a nice thing to sell. When you're going in and you're trying to figure out, all right, these are 30 landlords that we're going to have to reject. That has 300 employees that can't be part of the company. That's 400,000 members that are no longer going to have a place to work out. Like that's not a fun part of banking, but at the same time, my uncle said this to me because he ran a hospital, and I said, you got to fire people all the time. Like that must be so demoralizing. He's like, look, if I don't fire these people, everybody's losing a job. Right. So like, I got to kind of protect the base to an extent, or else if I don't make that hard decision, then, I don't have a business or I don't have a hospital. So, restructuring is about, the most efficient way to hibernate and to kind of weather a storm. So, I would advise companies globally, make sure you survive right now. Anytime a hurricane comes and hits part of the United States, everybody gets some plywood and they bang up on their, to protect their windows, and they go down to a basement, when there's a tornado watch. So like right now, the only thing you need to think about is hibernation and survival. And the other part of this is, as much as it feels like you're going to lose members forever, if I don't, have a counter punch, this industry, 50% of the people change their behavior every year. We've been talking and you've been talking about, retention and attrition and churn rate. Okay, we could affect some of that, but at the end of the day, like when you reopen, there'll be people that want to work out at your location. So like, don't think that like, just because somebody bought a Peloton, like that they're never going into a health club anymore. They bought a mirror. Like there's the average Orange Theory member also has a health club membership, so I'm hoping that people have a home workout, people have something they do on their iPhone in addition to that, and they also have a health club membership. So I wouldn't be concerned about what's going to happen on the other side. I would just be more concerned about getting to the other side. And that is in and of itself an achievement. So don't create more lofty goals than survival. If that's your main goal. And just do that for the next 6 to 12 months, and you'll be happy that you didn't waste money or like look at new locations, during a pandemic. It's not what you need to do.
Well, look, Pete, many thanks for that conversation. A really great insight into the markets. And ladies and gentlemen, as this Halo sector grows, be sure to make sure you connect with Pete and the team over at Integrity Square. Pete, thanks very much for a great conversation.
You got it, man. Good to see you again. And, we will continue to fight, and we will create the Halo effect. So I'm glad we're partnered up with you guys, and look forward to seeing you in person as soon as possible as well.